This is the Fixer Punk podcast, and I'm Grayson Peltier. Today's episode is going to be more issue-focused on a issue that I believe is going to affect everybody who is listening today. And I have a lot of thoughts on this, some of which is derived from my personal experience, some of it's from research. But I want to get all of these ideas, including some information that I believe is really underreported, into one place. And of course, this is about inflation and the recession. I've mentioned it a bit on my TikTok at FixerPunk, FIXERPUNK. But the part that I think is really not being talked about is what is really driving this and what the effects are going to be, not just on like the average worker, but on even the people who are outside of the middle class, and who's really going to be hurt the most by the efforts to correct inflation and the upcoming recession. And I've been kind of grappling with these fears myself and thinking about where I stand. And I think a lot of people are having that. And especially as we're coming up to the election, I want you to know, first off, if you're getting this episode right away as it's been posted, if you haven't voted or made a plan to vote, then I really, really recommend that you do so, and make sure that you vote for Democratic and progressive candidates that are going to protect your interests as a member of the working class and protect democracy overall. The show is not intended to be overly political, but I have to say that is the path forward, and there's a lot of deception and there's a lot of trickery, because with inflation, it is very, very, very much possible. In fact, it's probable that the cure is way worse than the disease. And that's what we have to be very, very cautious of, because the cure is a recession. And that might bring down prices a little bit, but you're going to, on net, be way, way, way worse, especially if you're in one of the most vulnerable populations. And I'll get to who that is shortly. But make sure that you voted or made your plan to vote. And you want to go for candidates that are going to protect your benefits and the money that needs to be put in to get us out of the recession that's coming. Because all of the Fed has cranked up interest rates so incredibly high, at the highest they've been in like 10, 20 years, that stuff is going to start crumbling down pretty soon. And we're going to need relief to get us through a recession. We're going to need economic relief for the working class and the lower class. And that is what is going to get us through. And you know who is going to block that? Republicans. And I can tell you, because I used to be on the board of Tea Party Youth, which the Tea Party was a movement that was launched after the 2008 recession. And all they were doing is obstructing government assistance that is helping people in need. Republicans are talking about taking away assistance from the working class. And that does not allow people to have the type of resources to make the changes in their lives to come out better from this crisis. And it hurts social equality and mobility a lot. So you want to be mindful of that as you go to vote. But back to the topic of inflation and the recession. Obviously, the number one thing that's being done for inflation is to go and increase interest rates. And that's being done by the Fed. There are other solutions here. A lot of this is being driven by gas prices, food prices, and there's a lot of corporate price gouging. And there are ways to target the corporate price gouging. There are ways to help oil prices. I just ranted a bit on Twitter at Grayson Nation, GREYSONNATION, about using the Defense Production Act to increase oil production and why that hasn't been done yet. And that is a step that should be done to target it. And I think Democrats would be in a way better place right now had they done that. However, there are a wide variety of things to be done, but they all require a level of political will that doesn't seem to exist and won't exist ever or in time if Republicans get voted back into power. So to fix inflation on it using the normal economic levers, if this is normal economic inflation, which I don't believe it is, or it is to a small extent, but it's also to another extent. It's combined with other factors. Obviously, the Ukraine situation is not helping. All the supply chain shocks from COVID aren't helping. Those types of things have ramifications long, long after they're gone. But it's not like a normal type inflation. And the mechanisms that are being used are very, very crude, blunt instruments in terms of the interest rates. And their goal is all to pull money out of the economy. That's what it does. By increasing the interest rate, then people have to pay more money on loans and things like that, credit cards, mortgages, and that money isn't being spent, and that should, in theory, reduce prices. Well, it's probably not going to move the very inflexible demand that you have. These are called elasticities of demand in economics, where the amount of product somebody buys based on their economic situation, it's either elastic or inelastic. Elastic means it changes based on it's like something that I'd like this, but if I don't have the money for it, I'm not going to buy it. Versus inelastic is like you have to have it. And a lot of the stuff is stuff that's going up in price, like gasoline, food, medicine. Those are all things that you have to have. So pulling money out of the economy isn't going to really fix that, and raising interest rates isn't going to fix that as much as it does to other types of items. What it's doing pretty effectively is it's going into the corporate budgets of tech companies in particular, which I'm not a fan of trickle-down economics. What I can tell you is that it's leading to people's jobs being cut because they can't finance their debt as easily, and and it's also leading to labor market contractions in general for jobs where people were able to work from home. Now they have to go and work in the office because the companies want to find ways to reduce people's hours. And you're going to start to see, and this is the part that scares me quite a bit as somebody who unfortunately suffers with a disability, is that the first people who are going to get hit by job losses are going to be what I call, and I'm not using this in any sort of derogatory sense, but the enhancement talent of the economy, the people who are not necessarily the high-level CEOs, the capitalists, but they're also not the people that are doing the extremely hard labor that absolutely positively has to be done, or else this whole thing grinds to a halt. Like the people who are working on warehouses and taking direct care of patients in hospitals and healthcare settings, the retail workers, even the fast food workers, those people, if they stop working, then everything just kind of crumbles to a halt. That's where they're essential during COVID. So it's not going to be those people. It's going to be the people who are, say, maintaining tech systems, maintaining IT infrastructure, network, but software, but doing it like remotely with flexible schedules. People that maybe have like a disability or neurodivergence that are able to work from home. Those are the kinds of people that are going to get cut the first. And then you have people who are in the workplaces, who are in, say, the fast food place or the retail store or the warehouse, that aren't as productive because of things like disabilities. Or there are people whose jobs it is to help people to gain more inclusion, people that work in like the diversity, equity, and inclusion field. They're trying to help bring more diversity into companies and to help people climb up the economic ladder. Those people are going to get hit really hard. Anything that's like funded by a nonprofit, because now what's happening is that interest rates are going up, so companies are like, okay, we can't spend any more on things. We have to just spend money on paying our debt. So the money that would have gone to paying for the greeter at the front of our store, the money that would have gone to charitable giving, the money that would have gone to doing some software work or some web development work that can be done remotely by somebody who's working from home, that money has to go to pay off debt, or more specifically to pay the interest on the debt. And you see that happening in a very, very extreme way with Twitter and with Elon Musk. Of course, that's an Elon Musk-induced shock. That's not a natural result of recession or inflation. but that's the kind of thing that you're going to see. I also heard that Amazon is, they put a freeze on corporate hiring, but of course they're still going to be hiring at the warehouses and Whole Foods because their whole operation doesn't move without those people. And that's why unionization among the people that are really, really the best workers that are doing all the really, really, really hard work of this economy. That's why that's such an incredibly powerful tool. And this whole situation with inflation, what I feel is happening, because we know that it's corporate price gouging to a good extent, is that they want to drive those people that maybe are working a few less hours, that have saved up a little bit more money, that are able to demand higher wages. They want to keep those people stuck in those jobs. And they want them to go back to being fearful again. They want you to go back to being fearful and basically being in the prison of your own mind when you're sitting in that workplace and thinking, I can never rise up, strike, protest, go and leave, quit or quiet quit my terrible minimum wage $7.25 an hour job, because every dime has to go to pay for food, medicine, and gas. So the ownership class, this is the part where I become a little bit of a conspiracy theorist. And I try not to be, but I have to. And that is because the class interest is very, very clearly toward the wealth class. When you increase the interest rates and when you keep the prices, you still keep the prices high. You're not bringing down those prices. And CEOs have admitted we can use this inflation as an excuse to keep our prices high. And when you have high prices, you have less money in the bank, you're not going to have money saved up in the bank where you're not going to be able to take advantage of those 3% interest rates you can now get on like an online savings account and like a Discover or one of those online savings accounts that's out there. That's not going to be you. That's going to be the people that are wealthier. They're going to take advantage of that. You're not going to have any savings because you're going to be spending it all on things that you need to survive. And you're not going to be able to leave that $7.25 an hour job. You're not going to want to strike. You're not going to want to protest. So it's just so convenient. To me, it's so convenient that the prices are staying up and the working class is being pressured, just as the owner class wants and needs for their own survival to oppress the working class again and put them back into their cage. Just saying, I'm not going to say that it's all intentional, but it's a little too convenient, if you asked me. And that's really what I'm worried about. And then when we go into a recession, that's when that happens. Because I remember in 2008, all the way through 2011, 2012, what happens is that you have a lot of these people who are growing, who are upwardly mobile, who are saving up money, and they just get completely knocked off. Like, I don't think my family recovered from 2008 until like 2018, 2019. And still there are emotional and personal scars from the financial and economic trauma, and it is a form of mental trauma. I can tell you that with absolute certainty. They didn't recover for that, and that keeps the people that are at the very, very top at the top, because it affects people's upward mobility. People who wouldn't be given the chance otherwise were being given the chance because the labor market was so tight that they're like, okay, maybe I can shut off my racial biases for a moment and hire a black software engineer. Because I can't find any whites to fill my role. I'm being extremely blunt here. But that's, unfortunately, I'm speaking in the language of people's unconscious and subconscious biases. Because I can tell you that there are people in the corporate world who think that way. People with a lot of money. The more money you have, the more likely you are to be racist. Until you get up to like a certain amount of wealth. At some point, then money just becomes money because you become more of an international business person. But that's completely beside the point here. But I think there's like a curve to it, really. But that's what we have to keep an eye out for, is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think the first chip to fall in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion is going to be diversity, equity, and inclusion in relation to people with disabilities, because those are the people they can excuse as being inefficient, even if they're doing good work, because they're not falling into like what the normal office norm is, or the normal business operation model. And they'll be like, they're just a pain. We're going to get rid of them because we need to cut costs anyway. And that's going to be a concern. The enhancement talent of the American economy are going to get hit the hardest, and the people that will be least able to bounce back, because nobody's going to want to hire somebody who has some sort of disadvantage. So we have to make sure that when we go into this recession, that we do things to make things equitable. And you know who's going to make sure that nothing is equitable and make sure that every single last cent that's going to the working class comes out? The Republicans. They're going to pull all the money out of the economy, and they're going to do it not by fixing the situation with price gouging, or with companies that are taking back in too much money and getting too profitable and just storing away all their money, and the rich people who are spending it frivolously. They're going to do it by reducing Social Security, by reducing Medicare, by reducing food stamps. And yes, that will reduce inflation. That's a brilliant way, because when poor people, and that's the thing, is that they're talking about, the stimulus checks. Those increased demand, those drove all the prices up because people are using them. Heck yeah, people are using them. A lot of them are saving them. Personal savings are at like an all-time, or not an all-time high, but like a high for like the last 10, 20 years. But people are using them because there are things that for years and years and years, people couldn't afford and that they needed. Like people that are catching up on like home repairs, things that didn't get done, medical treatments that didn't get done, things that they needed in their everyday life that they weren't able to buy before, that they should have been able to have before because they were working hard for it, but because we started to pay people justly. Some people got paid a little more justly now than they did before the pandemic. Then that money, of course, that demand, it's going to drive up demand a little bit, and combine that with the supply chain issue, and you're going to have some inflation. But what happened is that people got a chance to breathe, and we started to take care of people. And when we started to take care of people, the wealthy class took advantage of it. And they said, okay, we're going to raise prices. And we're going to keep those prices up even as we fix the supply chain problems and we get all the stuff moving. And it's not costing us any more to make the stuff, but we're going to raise the prices anyway. And then Congress, our politicians can't act because we don't have enough people in the Senate, and we don't have enough people in the House, and we don't have enough people in state legislatures to go after and deal with price gouging, with antitrust, grocery store chains that merge that would literally make the only grocery store in like my entire city all under one company, that Kroger and Safeway deal. Like every store is like Kroger or Safeway in my area, other than like Costco and a health food store. But obviously I don't see those as being like grocery stores. I don't know about you, but it's kind of an interesting dynamic there with grocery stores. But still, those are the kinds of things that monopoly power is what's hurting people, and we can't counter that because we don't have the political power to do it. And Republicans are going out there saying, the Democrats caused the inflation with the stimulus checks, and then we're going to fix it. But notice how they never say how they're going to fix it. Fixing it means taking the money away from you, or it means taking it away from your elderly grandparents, or it means taking it away from your disabled cousin, or it means taking it away from your kid who is working at a fast food place and is getting paid a little bit more, or actually really getting paid what they want, or that their store just unionized, the person who's Starbucks just unionized, and they're able to get a little more money. That's who they're going to take it from. Meanwhile, the upper class is still going to keep spending and spending and spending and spending as much as they want. But if we took away just a little bit of that money, it'll fix inflation too, because they won't be able to buy up as much real estate or other types of investable assets, which the interest rates are helping a little bit with that. But the more direct way, the more specific way to do that is with tax policy. And that's what the Inflation Reduction Act, which everybody started to poo-poo on, that's what it was trying to do. is get that money out of the hands of the people who really don't need it. And that IRS agents number, that's a total fallacy because they're just replacing people who are retired. But you have to have enough IRS agents to collect the money to pull it out of the economy. It's inflation reducing because you're pulling money out of the economy with taxes. You can do that with interest rates, or you can do it with taxes. Or you can put in price controls and deal with the actual price gouging problem. Or fix the production problem too. Those are all choices. And you want to have the right people making those choices. Now, on a personal level, what do we do? I've been thinking about how I'm going to respond in terms of the labor market and all of that. And yes, I get the temptation of like, okay, I need to take on extra work and subject myself to crappy employers to try to keep my economics standing up. Thankfully, I'm in a situation where I don't necessarily have to do that. But I would say just don't give up the fight in terms of getting wage raises, improvements in conditions, better bosses, work from home if you're in an industry that has that, because the fight is only going to get harder and harder and harder, especially after this election with how it's going. And that's why it's so important to show up to vote. Because if you want to get pay raises, you want to have better working conditions, you better get the party in there that's going to let you have those things. You want student loan reductions? Do you want to go into a recession with more student loan debt, or do you want to go into a recession with less student loan debt? Do you want to go into a recession with a union and with higher pay and with medical, or do you want to go into one without it? That's the choice. Who cares if you put the party in who's going to lower your gas price by 5-7 cents if your wage is going to go down by $5 or $7 an hour? It's just, I know it's a losing game. It feels that way. But you better take all the chances you can get. You take the shot that you get. And that is by voting in more Democrats into office who are going to actually listen and do something about this. And they didn't cause this afterwards. If anything, what they did was they helped workers to be able to get what they've deserved for way, way too long. And they've tried to deal with the capital strike, and that's pretty much what I'm calling a lot of these price-raising activities as a capital strike. Tried to get that reined in too, but they couldn't because they didn't have enough of a majority. You bring the Republicans in, yeah, your inflation is going to be fixed. But who's that going to help? If we bring down prices a little bit by putting a bunch of people out of work and making them struggle and making it so that, yeah, the poor person can't buy a little bit extra food. They can't buy more gas to go on a road trip because they got their wages cut. Yeah, that's going to lower gas prices. But who is that going to help? And who's going to be the most hurt? And is there a better way to do it? Those are the important questions. And also, in terms of equitable economic development and planning, we have to make sure that the gains in equity and inclusion, the means that we've used to close the racial wealth gap, the increases in home ownership for minorities, the increases in wealth for minorities, we have to make sure that those stay in place, that stuff still remains important. And in terms of corporations, the check on that so that corporations do the right thing, that's consumers, that's the government, but it's unions too. It's the workers in power, because if you have the workers who are running the factory line or the warehouse line or whatever, willing to go on strike because they're not, the employer's not caring for everybody and standing in solidarity, then they still have to act, recession or not, or else their business is not going to survive. So it's a matter of choices and positioning. And at this point, I have to kind of learn to be more judicious in how I spend my money, of course. We all should probably look into that. If you can save money in one of those high-interest savings accounts, do it. The Treasury I bonds, if you have some long-term money, if you're financially somewhat secure, you have some long-term money to put away, those Treasury Direct I bonds, they're still a good deal. They're at like 6.4 something percent. interest. You have savings accounts at like 3% interest. If you have some money to like seriously risk, the stock market is sort of at a discount. This is not financial advice. You should ask somebody who actually knows what they're talking about, not me. But if you can conserve and preserve money, and you stay careful, especially through the holidays, to the point where just have yourself in a position where if the recession comes and the boss comes into wherever you're working and says, "Hey, this is the recession. We are going to cut your wages and you have to stay because we know that you have no money and you have nowhere else to go because nobody else is hiring." Then you can just look at the boss and say, "I'm good." And you could all look at the boss and say, "We're all good. We could leave here tomorrow if we wanted to. And you know what? We're going on strike tomorrow. And there's nothing you can do about it." That's what power looks like, and that's what it feels like. I promise to come back with a little more fun stuff where you can poke a little fun at me and my situation on a future episode. So please make sure you're subscribed for that. Go to fixerpunk.com, fixerpunk.com. Make sure you follow the TikTok. That's the most up-to-date fixerpunk on TikTok as well as on Instagram. Instagram's not updated as often. And thank you so much for listening. I appreciate that you've taken this time. And please go and vote. If there's one thing you take away from this episode, it is that. Thank you, and I will see you next time.